Hi everyone, welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. This is Education Tonight, and in a few moments' time, Adam and guest co-host Paul Hazzard will be joining you live and exclusive on Teachers Talk Radio for Education Tonight in association with John Catt Educational, teaching how-tos easy for you and apps for good. You'll hear more about those later on.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello and good evening and welcome to tonight's Education Tonight with myself, Adam Spence, and Paul Hazzard. Good evening, Paul. Are you okay?
Going great, Adam. Yes, going great. Yeah. Apart from this summer weather, it's atrocious here in Northern Ireland.
Okay. Well, we've had the week that everyone kind of looks forward to, where the weather goes balmy, and it always makes me kind of flash back to the days at school when. I don't know if you ever did this. You kind of the night before you stuck your water bottle in the freezer, and took like a solid block of ice into the classroom, and then for the rest of the day, it's kind of as it happens, then leaks all over your bag, all over the desk, and whatever. So I don't know if you've been following kind of the Education Tonight's campaign, which is the war on water in the classroom, but it's taken a kind of solid base this week in England as we've had kind of crazy weather. There's two things that always come to mind. It's a bit like the snow day situation. Does the email come through from the school and say no blazers, no tie?
Yep.
I mean, it's probably one of the most exciting things, isn't it, that can happen?
Isn't it really? Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's something we look forward to.
Finally, the day comes where we can take our tie off, and not wear the blazer. But really appreciate you stepping in tonight, and
very welcome.
Have a good chat with our host tonight. Another guest we've got coming in, which we've got Professor Neil Humphrey in tonight to discuss. And again, this is a topic that we seem to keep coming back to on Education Tonight: the mental health of our students, and asking the question, really posing the question, what is going on with young people and mental health. So obviously, Paul, you're in Northern Ireland. I'm in England, so we've got a kind of a bit of a look at the UK as a whole tonight, to really see how we can address some of these issues that seem to be kind of keep coming up in education. And last week we spoke to a doctor, a pediatrician, who was really looking at mobile phones as one of the sources for this mental health issue that we have in the UK at the moment. So we've got an expert. I think it's if Neil is available to come on to us tonight. Good evening, Neil Humphrey. Thank you very much for joining us on Education Tonight. In terms of mental health, what are the kind of the key challenges that are affecting our students or young people more generally at the moment? What are you kind of seeing?
Well, it's a difficult time to be a young person, I think. We've got, start with the big things. We've got, in this country, we've got massive inequality that impacts, young people particularly. But, we've had a cost of living crisis. We've got issues in relation to, things like climate change and anxieties about the future, discrimination, Bullying is a perennial issue. That's not a new issue, but it's a really significant issue still. And also, I think young people repeatedly tell us things about, feeling the increased pressure from school and kind of, high stakes assessments and things like that. So there's a kind of real mix of different issues that I think are kind of impacting young people's mental health. And you mentioned, I think in the intro and the lead in there, you mentioned about.
I mean,
Go on, sorry.
No, good. Please carry on.
No,
there's like a little bit of a lag on the system.
All right, no problem. You mentioned so smartphones, and we've been doing some research in this area. So I've got a colleague of mine, Margarita Panayiotou, who works in our department, who's doing a big study on social media and young people's mental health. And interestingly enough, one of the things, so we just published a really big study that looks at data from Understanding Society, which is the big household study, about 12,000 young people, looking at their data over time. And actually what that study found was that time spent on social media was actually among the least influential factors for young people's mental health.
Okay.
What they found was, so bullying, which I mentioned, dissatisfaction with schoolwork, and family dysfunction were the like, if you were looking for like the most powerful influences on young people's mental health. So I think one of the things that strikes me is we've tended to focus on social media because that's the kind of thing that's changed. That's the thing that kind of this generation of young people have, which certainly my generation didn't. I'm not going to guess either of your two ages, but I'm going to guess you didn't either, right? But so when I was at school, so we see that, oh, that's the thing that's changed, and therefore it must be that. But actually, that study and some other really robust studies are actually suggesting that it's not the kind of folk devil that we think it is. Now, that's not to say that some young people aren't going to have experiences on social media that do impact their mental health negatively. It's just it's not anywhere near as influential as I think people think it is. And actually, there is some evidence to suggest that it's not just time spent on social media. It's about things like what you actually do when you're on social media. So if you're using social media productively to connect with other people, to produce content, etc., that can actually be a really beneficial thing for our well-being. So yeah, I think the jury's definitely not come to a verdict necessarily on the evils of social media just yet.
So Neil, could I ask you then, has the prevalence of mental health issues, has it got worse? Or are we just kind of sensing that it's worse? What's happening?
It's a difficult one to kind of pick apart. So the data from, for example, NHS Digital, they do the kind of national estimates of prevalence for young people's mental health. And their data indicates that we have seen a rise in prevalence of mental health, of some types of mental health difficulties over the last kind of 20 plus years. And so if you take that at face value, yes, it looks like mental health problems are on the increase, but there is also a school of thought around the fact that over that same time period there has been kind of societal changes in the way that we talk about mental health, and actually that what we may be seeing is not that things genuinely are worse necessarily, but that more young people are willing to disclose that they are not feeling okay. So and it's really very difficult when you look at the kind of prevalence studies over time and the time trends to actually truly pick apart what's a genuine rise in prevalence and what's actually just changes in the way that we think about and talk about mental health, and the comfort with which young people feel able to disclose mental health problems. I think, though, my gut instinct is even if we are more comfortable and young people are more comfortable talking about their mental health and disclosing mental health problems when they experience them, I don't think that alone can account for the rises in prevalence that we've seen. So I think even after you've ruled out the effect of that, there is probably still a rise over time, I would say.
Yeah. And then I suppose kind of hand in hand with that, then, is there a greater vulnerability with modern children? You know, look, I grew up in the 60s, you know, went to school in the 60s and 70s, and it was kind of, you know, you went to school and like that was it. You dealt with things, you managed with them, or you didn't, or you found some way. And I'm not saying, you know, we were, you know, in any way great or massively resilient or anything, but I'm wondering, you know, are the children of today, are they less resilient and more prone to being affected by? And I understand there's many more factors nowadays. Life was much simpler in my day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's the case that young people are necessarily less resilient than young people were in my generation or in any, you know, kind of older generations. And I think, you know, the pandemic actually is a good example of just how resilient young people were, because they were kind of summarily ignored during the pandemic and were completely cut off from their friends, you know, and kind of the you know, so the things like that experience are once in a century, let alone once in a generation experience, and the resilience that you know, young people demonstrated through lockdown and things like that, I think is fantastic. So I don't think it's necessarily that they're less resilient. I think there's just, you know, with each generation there are different challenges, and with our current generation there is a perfect storm of kind of lots of different challenges to do with inequality and to do with, you know, like I said, at the moment, you know, we've got cost of living crisis, which is affecting many young people, you know, who will be worried about, you know, for some young people, it's worrying about where the next meal's coming from, whether their parents are going to be in employment, all those kinds of things. So there are, you know, different stresses that different generations experience. And I think that plays out then in what we see in terms of mental health.
You mentioned COVID and the pandemic, and welcome back, Adam, by the way. I think you froze. I think you got
I think what's happened is that two teenage daughters who just keep flicking through kind of YouTube channels as fast as possible. I have asked them not to, but it's just
eating up your bandwidth.
It's just the bandwidth just zaps. So I always say, please, just for this hour, can you just kind of bear with me? Interesting, I noticed in the background there your Lila poster. So if Lila's listening upstairs, could you please get off the internet and give us a chance? So thanks for carrying on, Paul, in that interim.
No bother. Yeah, no bother. Yeah. So Neil, you mentioned COVID, and I think if Tom can go back one slide, I think we have some statistics. There it is. There, yeah. So, you know, that survey that's done there, it's on the screen now, and children and their feelings about school. If you look at the right-hand side, you'll see that, you know, I am worried about the effect COVID-19 might have had on my future exam results. And that seems to me to be coming down. And I am worried about the effect COVID-19 has had on my schoolwork. Well, that's around about the same factor. Yeah. Any kind of views on that, Neil?
Well, yeah, I mean, so what we know is, you know, so the COVID, you know, had an impact during lockdown in terms of young people not being in school, and obviously, you know, experiences of, you know, feeling worried about the impact of the pandemic on exam results and so on. Obviously, that is going to start to dissipate over time. So I can see this is data from 2023, so it's dissipating over time. But there are other impacts of the pandemic on young people, particularly just around in the immediate period of the pandemic around their mental health. So, you know, so we had a study that so two colleagues of mine, Rosie and Joao, we had one of our big projects that we were doing for the Department for Education, where we were collecting data on young people's mental health, and then the pandemic happened and it kind of blew a hole in it. But what it enabled us to do was actually use the data to do a kind of natural experiment. So we had a group of young people who we took measures, pre and post measures before COVID, before lockdown happened, and then a second cohort who we'd just done the pre measure for, and then lockdown happened, and then we weren't able to do the post measure until after the restrictions had been lifted. So you've got one group who you can look at their mental health changes before the pandemic, and another group that lived through the pandemic, and we can compare the two. And so what Rosie and Joao's paper showed, what their analysis showed was a fairly significant increase in symptoms of depression among young people. So something like a 6% increase in that kind of year of the pandemic in depression symptoms, particularly among girls, and things also, the sorts of things we would see alongside that, like reductions in life satisfaction. So there was that immediate impact of the pandemic on young people's mental health. And what we're starting to see now, I think, and with examples like the data that you've got up on screen there, is the effects are starting to dissipate, but there is still a residual effect there because particularly for teenagers, when lockdown happened and schools were closed and all the rest of it, these are young people who at the time in life when peer connection and peer relationships are absolutely fundamental and vital to healthy development. I mean, that's what defines adolescence, right? Is we become independent from our parents and we become more dependent on our peers, and they were kind of that they were robbed of that by the necessary restrictions that took place. And so obviously that's that when we see the impact on mental health, that's the kind of thing that we see. But just coming back to social media, I think that's another good example of where actually social media was a bit of a lifeline for some young people. So I think about, I've got 3 kids, one of whom is now nearly 17, but she was in year 8 when lockdown happened. And because we have social media, she was able to stay connected somewhat to her friends still. If lockdown had happened when I was in secondary school, when I was in year 8, we didn't have social, I would have literally no way of connecting with, wouldn't have seen my friends for months and months. And so that's a situation where actually the technology, the connectivity that social media brings could actually be a real benefit. For some young people, it was an absolute lifeline.
I mean, that's one of the interesting things we kind of mentioned last week, because we had this kind of real breakthrough in technology almost at the right time for COVID. That sounds strange to say, but it's kind of, we had the technology to kind of carry on in some way with kind of education and keeping people connected. But do you think that has inadvertently kind of created something where young people are now almost completely addicted to this and isolated themselves within this digital space? Are you seeing any kind of outcomes there?
No, I mean, I think so. What I see, anecdotally with my kind of case study of my teenage daughter, but also with the work that we do with young people in the research that we do, young people are very savvy users of digital technology. They and not just with social media. Any advancements in technology, typically it's young people that lead the way. And so, what we see is, I don't think it's addiction at all. I think it's to do with the fact that they are equally comfortable with their online selves and online lives as they are with their in-person lives, and they kind of don't necessarily even see the distinction between the two. They seamlessly kind of go from one to the other. Now, having said that, I think if I were to have a moratorium on social media in my house and say to my teenager, right, phones away, iPad away, no kind of, no Snapchat, no Insta, no whatever, I would probably have a problem on my hands. But I think it's, it would be, we'd soon find other things to do. And so it's not at that kind of level of addiction. It's just more that kind of thing of they're digital natives, the current generation of young people. So they've always known this kind of technology. And I think if we think back to previous technological developments where we've had these kinds of kind of moral panics, if you like, about the impact on young people. So when I was at school in the 90s, it was kind of video games and horror movies and things like that. That was the thing that was going to destroy this generation of young people. And we were all addicted to video games. That was the other thing, so we do kind of tend to replay this when new technology emerges. But, I think we've got to kind of, it's not that there are no harms from social media and from these new kinds of technology. It's just that we've got to be a bit more savvy in the way that we do it. So if we just sort of try and blame social media for everything, for all the problems that we see with young people, that's going to alienate them even further, because it's such an integral part of their lives. We have to find ways of working with them to make sure that they get the best out of social media, that they stay stay safe online.
That's a good point you make there, Neil. I'm wondering, do we have to change what we are doing in order to help young people? Like, for example, I read today, it was a survey by Mental Health UK. I mean, there's a shocking 42% of university students suffer from mental health issues that require professional help. But amazingly, almost half of them don't seek in-person help, but they would seek online help. Do we need to change the way we provide and reach out to young people?
I think we absolutely do. I think we kind of we kind of crusty old people. We need to get with the program. Not present company accepted, of course. We need to kind of get with the program a little bit, because I think this is the thing: is we, again, coming back, young people lead the way when it comes to technological advancements and embracing them. And it takes the rest of the world, there's a lag before we kind of catch up. And I think the example that you just gave there, Paul, is a really good example where our current model that's been in place for years around how we provide mental health support, it's not kept pace with the way in which young people like to, not all young people, but many like to engage and receive support. There are some really great examples of kind of ways of accessing mental health support online, but we need more of them and make them accessible and appealing to everybody, because the face-to-face kind of, go and see the counsellor in the room and sit on the couch. That's not necessarily going to be something that a young person at university is going to be comfortable with, but they might engage with something that uses the same sort of therapeutic techniques, but is through it's through an online medium.
Yeah. Do you think this is taught well in schools at the minute, mental health? Obviously, going back to kind of our childhood, I don't remember anyone talking about it at all at school. Obviously, there's a lot more information. Teachers having CPD. What's your kind of reaction to kind of what's going on in the school itself in terms of what the teacher can provide for young people at the moment?
I think we're getting better. I think it's still there's still a way to go. We're getting better. If I think back again to when I was at school, absolutely, I don't know that the words mental health were even uttered. It would have been an alien concept when I was at school in the 90s. So I think we're doing a lot better now than we were historically. There's a lot of work, the fact that we've got now, designated mental health leads, the fact that we've got mental health support teams, the fact that we've got those staff that are working to, look at kind of ways in which we can assess and monitor mental health. So our big project at the moment, which is Be Well, which we run in Greater Manchester and down on the South Coast, is about kind of generating data on young people's mental health and the things that influence their mental health, so that schools actually got good data to work with to think about, who's going to be most vulnerable and who, what can we do to change our provision and things like that. We are getting better, but I think, we still, it's kind of like the poor cousin still to the kind of, we've still got this obsession, I think, with, the academic attainment is the be all and end all. And I know that, teachers don't believe that. It's the kind of pressure that they get from the government. But what it plays out as is, almost like a zero-sum game that like, if you're not focusing on reading, writing, adding up and doing science, then it's time wasted. When in actual fact, the time spent supporting young people's mental health and well-being, we know that their mental health and well-being influences their academic attainment and vice versa. So it's all kind of contributing, it's all intertwined. So I think we need, we're on the right direction, but we need kind of, it needs to be properly resourced, basically. And also I think schools need to be given the message from government that basically this is part of, this is as important a part of your remit as good attainment outcomes. I would see parity of esteem between well-being and attainment. That would be a real goal for a kind of a good modern education system.
Yeah, because I know we're in the middle of the Euros, and sorry to any England fans, it's been a bit kind of bleak so far. But football coaches would do this, a football team would do this, wouldn't they? They'd look at the rounded individual, wouldn't they? nowadays. There's so much gone into kind of sports science. Sometimes I don't think kind of the education science behind getting the very best out of the learner in front of you. Just to open it a bit wider, what do you think about the wider society? Are we getting anywhere with the kind of the stigma around mental health? Kind of how what's your kind of feelings on the wider society, and how does that impact on children whilst they're in school?
Again, I think we're on the right road here. When I think about, again, thinking back to previous generations and when I was at school, mental health in those days was very stigmatized. It wasn't something that was openly discussed. We've come a really long way in terms of normalizing not just the concept of mental health and the fact that we all from time to time will experience some kinds of difficulties. But I think we need to go further. And I think about there's the campaign. So one that always springs to mind for me is, I don't know if you've heard of Andy's Man's Club, and that's that's something that's particularly because some of this is quite gendered, and so getting men to open up and talk about their mental health is really quite difficult. It's not necessarily something that is typical for if we were three blokes in the pub, it would be more unusual for us to talk about how we're feeling than it would be so it can be quite a gendered thing, but we are getting better at normalizing it. And actually, the research tells us that it's actually quite normal to experience mental health problems at least one point in your life. So a colleague of mine, Jess Dayton, that I do a lot of work with at the Anna Freud Centre, she did a big study a couple of years ago using data from kids from the very early years all the way until they were up to age 14. And what she was looking at was this idea of enduring mental health. So what proportion of children by age 14 have had absolutely no problems with their mental health at all and have experienced really good well-being. And what she actually found was that was fewer than half of the children that they had in this big study. So actually the norm during childhood and adolescence is that at least once, you're likely to have experienced a period of mental health difficulties, and in many cases actually more than one. So if we normalize the idea that it's okay not to be okay, and that it's okay to talk about it, and that it's okay to seek support for it, we will get better at kind of early intervention and prevention, because many mental health difficulties we internalize. So if I'm feeling sad and depressed and anxious, it might not be immediately obvious to you because it's I'm internalizing that. It's the internal dialogue in my head rather than any outward signs. And so that makes it all the more important that we kind of have a society where people do feel comfortable talking about how they're feeling and being really open and honest and saying, look, I'm really not feeling great at the moment. And thinking about ways in which, who might I go to? If I'm a young person, is there a trusted adult? Is there a trusted adult in school, or is there a trusted adult, at home or in the community? Is there somebody, or whether it's peers, is there somebody that I can reach out to? And that's quite a big step, particularly for a young person to take, to reach out and seek support. And that's the kind of stuff that I think we need more of in schools, is that kind of idea of kind of mental health literacy, of recognizing the signs when we're not feeling okay, but also feeling comfortable about being able to talk about it and seek help when we need it.
I want to come back to you on the literacy side, but I just want to say a big thank you to our show sponsors tonight. We have got John Katz, as always. So at this point on Education Time, we always say hello to John. As always, this show is brought to you with John Katz, and you can go to John Katz bookshop.com and use the offer code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. So thank you, John, for your support, and thanks everyone, John Katz. We're also sponsored by Teaching How To's, which is another fantastic organisation. So we thank them for their support. You can visit Teaching How To's. That's the number 2.com for information about their kind of technology and their visual guides for teaching techniques. Also, Easy for You empowering education with Easy for You. You can visit www.easy4u.school. And finally, a big thank you to Apps for Good, who deliver kind of introductory free computer courses, and you can go to www.appsforgood.org. So just to go, and I did say 20 minutes. I'm sorry if you got to keep you to this evening, Neil. But in terms of literacy education, do you think that should be a kind of a compulsory element to the national curriculum now?
In terms of mental health literacy, well, I mean, it kind of already is in the sense that it's in the kind of relationships and sex education. It's kind of built into the kind of the new RSE.
Yeah. Do you think it should be more explicit than that? Do you think there should literally be mental health literacy? And actually, that's something that people should really look at. To learn. It could almost be like a subject, couldn't it, in itself?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we'd need to go far as it being a kind of a subject, but I think it definitely has its place. And particularly, I think, we have to have an offer within schools that reflects the needs of the generation of young people that we're serving and that we're educating. And given all of the data, including some of the stuff that we've discussed tonight around young people's mental health, I think, there is a really key place within the kind of the average school offer around ensuring that students are educated around the concept of mental health, what things affect our mental health, what we can do to improve our mental health, and again that concept of help seeking and ways of reaching out and normalizing seeking support and reducing stigma. So I think if it were up to me, I think it would definitely be something that would be taught across schools in our country. And I think not every young person is going to need it, of course, but for those that do, it could be extremely valuable. If it helps a young person that's feeling that they're having real challenges with their mental health, but if it helps them seek help and receive it and therefore feel better as a result, then it's time well spent.
Yeah, and I do think kind of us as a profession sometimes are not the greatest at kind of reaching out and getting support as well. I don't know if you've got any experience of that, Paul, but I think kind of there's definitely been times in my life where I should have reached out and I kind of just did that thing about come on, carry on, I've got lessons to teach, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, and I just wanted to kind of plow on. And I sometimes wonder now if it has that the mental health of teachers is now showing through those kind of retention and recruitment rates as well. It's kind of another Venn diagram that we've talked about.
I think that survey that we had up about pupils, feelings about school, I would like somebody to ask those same questions to teachers. There it is. Tom's put it back up. But I have at least one friend I can turn to for support in a school. Well, many schools will. I feel safe when I'm at school. I think those would be really interesting just to see the response of teachers, because, I think that was a super question you asked, Adam, and smashing answer, Neil. But one of the things I think, I really wonder, is didactically teaching about mental health, is that good? And is it something that's not much better caught so that, the relationships, the ethos, the feel of the school, what am I like, the whole person that I am is coming up that avenue and into school. How will I feel? How will I manage on that day? I just get a sense that requires an enormous shift, a meta level shift in what schools are about, and individual schools have to change what they're at.
I mean, I 100% agree. I think you always need the core in addition to the taught, and it's no good having, a kind of, on the one hand, okay, we're going to teach about mental health literacy, but within a climate that isn't supportive of mental health. So I think we've got to have this kind of, again, it's kind of overused, but this idea of a whole school model that we've got to, schools have to be a place that nurture young people, where they feel safe and they feel happy, and the kind of the climate and the values of the school and the inclusiveness of the school and the relationships, that's just as important, if not more important, than the element of the curriculum within RSE, for example, where we're kind of talking about these kinds of topics. You need both, and you need to be able to kind of, the great schools get both and they get the balance right. But if you have one without the other, it's never going to be quite as powerful. And you need, again, it's not just the universal stuff. It's not just the curriculum that's delivered for all kids. You also need additional support for kids. Some kids are going to need more than just what's offered in the class, and we need a system that enables that as well. We need a system that enables us to identify and monitor so that we can make sure that we're adding in support where it's needed. So it's a much more complex picture than just providing kind of curricular support around mental health. And again, schools need proper resourcing to do it. I think the other thing, though, I suppose that I'd really regret not having said while we're on air is, the work that we do, the thing that we keep coming back to is this is not just the responsibility of schools. So schools get a lot of the responsibility, and teachers get a lot of the responsibility pushed onto them because young people are in school for most of the time, right? But our kind of slogan with our work is young people's well-being is everybody's business. So while schools might be central to all of this, it shouldn't just be that other thing of, okay, this is for schools to deal with. It's a societal issue. We need those that work in and around schools, kind of allied professionals. We need societal change. We need communities to be more. We basically need a kind of it's not just a shift in terms of schools. It's a shift. It's a societal and cultural shift that we need.
Yeah, and sometimes we've mentioned it before about the school itself. And I understand why we've the safeguarding system that's in place, but sometimes it does look to the outside world of nobody comes past these gates. This is not a place for anybody else, and I just sometimes wonder if because the school that I used to work at did have the name community in it, and rightly or wrongly, people from the community regularly came in and out of the school all the time. Since I think about 2010, that school changed its name. The word community went, academy came with it. The big gates came up. The wall all the way around the campus was completely blocked off, so nobody could see in or out of it. I just wonder if inadvertently, by creating that kind of safe space, rightly so, safeguarding, that we've then created this kind of mental barrier where the community feels that is, or society feels that's something that happens there. That's nothing to do with us. Yeah. That's kind of outside of our kind of remit to look at. And then, some people might feel that's what happens kind of in there is down to the teachers and down to the school itself, but there are some kind of fantastic heads. We spoke to Simon Hart, who's now branded himself as the happy head, the other week, and he had about kind of being kind and these kind of core messages in the vision of the school kind of gets to that core. So before I let you go, is there anything kind of, obviously we've talked, I think kind of not overly negatively, but is there something kind of that we can take away that's really positive? Are there some like really good trends? Is there something kind of really kind of good happening within the mental health field that kind of gives us some kind of optimism around mental health kind of going forward?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I would mention. One is just a general trend that we've seen with some of our data in the big Be Well study, the one that I mentioned. So we've got data on that that goes back, well, it was before the Be Well study, but the combined authority in Manchester used to do a survey called the Life Readiness Survey that we've then kind of integrated. So they've got data on it's young people's optimism for the future. So we've got data from the pre-pandemic all the way up to just before Christmas with our Be Well data. And what we saw there is we've seen when the pandemic happened, we saw young people's optimism nosedive. So it went down, as you would imagine, dramatically in 2020. And what we've seen in our most recent data, which was, like I said, we gathered just before Christmas, we had about 20,000 young people responded to the survey, is it's now back up at the levels it was prior to the pandemic. So I think that's really encouraging. So, you know, the pandemic was very difficult for everybody, but particularly for young people. But signs like that, you know, young people are feeling as optimistic as they did prior to the pandemic, that we've kind of had that element of recovery, and optimism and hope for the future is, you know, massively important for our mental health. If we see that, you know, if we feel that tomorrow is going to be better than today, that kind of general sense of the future is bright, it does wonders for our sense of well-being. So that's really encouraging. But in terms of trends of things that are promising in terms of improving mental health, I mean, there's all kinds of different things. We've done trials. We're doing a trial at the moment in Manchester of a social and emotional learning intervention in primary schools, in about 60 primary schools in Manchester, looking at that, and that looks quite promising in terms of its potential to improve young people's mental health. We've just done some work coming back to the idea of targeted support for young people. We just finished a piece of work with a wonderful charity called Football Beyond Borders, who do work with at-risk young people. Young people are about year 8, year 9, at risk of kind of exclusion in school and at risk of all kinds of other negative outcomes. They do fantastic work with those young people, you know, in terms of like building a relationship with a trusted adult, with a youth practitioner. Because it's football, so there's lots of physical activity as well, lots of kind of peer support built as part of that, and a kind of core social emotional skills curriculum. And we did a piece of evaluation work looking at what they do and the impact, and we found it had a really substantial impact on young people's mental well-being. So some of the most vulnerable young people in our education system, there are programs like that can be used to support their well-being and kind of get them re-engaged with school and get them feeling better about themselves. So there's kind of this stuff out there that I think can be used while we're looking at the kind of bigger piece around, you know, I mentioned, you know, we need this societal change and this cultural change, and we need to reduce inequality and so on. That takes decades, right? And none of us are in government, so there's actually only so much we can do. But in the meantime, there are approaches like that we can use, that we know there is good evidence that will show that they're effective. And so, you know, one of the things that we can do is, I think, promote the kind of, you know, connect schools to the evidence base so that they're making informed decisions about their provision. This particular approach has a good evidence base behind it, therefore it's a good investment of our time and resources. So I think that's kind of crucial. But there's lots out there like that can be effective for young people's well-being.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Neil. We really appreciate it here on Education Tonight. You know, as always, please carry on with all the hard work. We are picking up, we are reading it, and that's how I managed to get in contact with you tonight. So hope you have a great evening, and thank you very much for being on the show. That was Professor Neil Humphrey, Professor of Psychology of Education at the Manchester Institute of Education. So I think I've just kind of calmed down after completely kind of losing all connection and, you know, digging out the mobile phone quickly to get back on tonight. Thank you very much, Paul, for keeping that going.
No problem. It happens, doesn't it?
So do you want to be on the show to help me? There you go. Get on with it. There's the show. So we just say we've got a kind of a wider piece now to say a thank you to our sponsors that have sponsoring the show tonight.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Have you ever heard of teaching how-tos? Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now it's a reality with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised, socialised platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively, or with their peers, or with their new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for their next webinar. Easy4U is where innovation meets accessibility. Their subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience. By eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology, Easy4U isn't just providing tools, they are shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy4U, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easy4u.school. Apps for Good gives schools free introductory computing courses. The courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create a prototype app for good. Visit www.appsforgood.org to find out more.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you for the support of those companies to as they sponsored tonight's show. So we've got some shows coming up over the next couple of hours, days, leading up to the election, and we're going to move on to have a look at some of the manifestos in a moment. Just to mention that Chris Wilkinson's got a show coming up at 9 o'clock. Tom Rogers has got a show coming up at 7:30 on Monday, looking at the election manifestos. There's a show with Claire on 7:30 on Wednesday, so to look at the election as well. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be here next Thursday, but I believe that Paul is going to be as well here on Education Tonight to on election night, I guess, as it kind of comes up. So we've kind of, Paul, had like a meander through the main parties so far. So we haven't looked at the Greens or the SNP, but I just want to kind of just put up a graph from Schools Week that's just showing at the minute the most important issues, because I think sometimes obviously we're Teachers Talk Radio, education is very important to us. But I have noticed during the hustings that have been going on, that have been live on the TV, that education isn't getting much of a mention. And thus far, there hasn't been a great amount of detail in the manifestos around education. So I thought this was an interesting graph to show that actually, in terms of the country, education at the moment is sitting at 12%. What are your reflections on that, Paul?
Yeah, I did. I saw that today, and it kind of confirmed for me what's been going on. When you watch some of the hustings and you watch some of the debates, you kind of think, yeah, okay, we're invested in education, but I don't hear these people talking about it in television. Until very recently, if you went looking for the education part of their manifestos, you had a lot of trouble finding it. And we've certainly come a long, long way since, one former prime minister shouted, education, education, education. I don't know where that's gone. I can't help thinking, that it's short-sighted in many ways. Education is a vital, critical part of any modern society. And not only is it important now, but even from a politician's point of view, education is important in the future. That's where the voters are. Yeah. I thought they would want to court education much more. There are a lot of teachers, a lot of classroom assistants, a lot of people involved in education. They're all voters. I just wonder, are we?
Where is it? Because like you said, like there's parents as well of the children involved. But I think you're absolutely right. It has been quite difficult to find information. I think kind of we got the raw end of a candidate that we know when we said we couldn't find a particular party's manifesto points.
We got our knuckles wrapped at him.
we did. We won't mention his name, but I think that was the quickest response I've ever had to any message on our on our chat. But should we have a quick look at the Green Party? Because once we kind of found there, The Green Party, they have been very critical of Ofsted since certainly the inquiries that have been going on with Ofsted. Obviously, that's a standout manifesto pledge for them, that they're going to abolish Ofsted. Again, like a lot of the manifestos, it's lacking the detail in terms of what it will be replaced with. I did post out for anyone from the Green Party or any other party to please come on and comment on these things. There doesn't seem to be any kind of information about that. Likewise, it says kind of scrap. There's a lot of kind of scrapping and in terms of the SATs and league tables, and abolish testing and in primary and secondary. But there seems to be a kind of, again, as we've kind of alluded to there seems to be a lack of detail in terms of what would actually happen, or what is the alternative approach to education here.
Yeah, I thought the Green Party manifesto, I thought it was passionate. I thought it touched a lot of areas that make a lot of sense. I think the days of Ofsted are over, but you're right. I mean, what do they become replaced with? I also, if you look on your graphic up there, they want to increase school funding by 8 billion. When you dig down into their manifesto, they kind of think that's going to cost around about 14 billion, a lot of which they're going to borrow. Now, I know they hope to claw some of it back by abolishing the VAT on private schools and so on, but that's a lot of money for anybody to find. Be great if it happened, but I just wonder how easy that policy would be to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and that's been the criticism, of a lot of parties, and it was the same last night, wasn't it? About kind of, where's the, going back to the Theresa May magic money tree. Where is a lot of this kind of funding coming from? Because you've also got the restoration of grants, the ending of tuition fees. I mean, this is an expensive manifesto for education, isn't it?
It's an expensive manifesto, and yet I do think it's heartfelt and it's passionate, and I think there's something about that manifesto that's very much about believing in education and the right of entitlement of everybody to be educated. Yeah.
If we just have a look at the SNP, I'm just aware of time, and I want to kind of make sure that we don't cross over into Chris's show. But we did a kind of mini tour of Scotland in last summer. Kind of drove up, had a bit of a drive around Scotland. My grandparents are Scottish, so I have a kind of a link to Scotland. And certainly when I'm in Scotland, there is a very proud heritage of education, particularly around their universities. They're very proud of that. I don't think you go on a bus tour around a city in England, and there'd be so much talk around their kind of universities and their scholars and their academics as there is in, say, Glasgow, for example. They are very proud of their educational heritage. And obviously, the standout thing with Scotland always is about the university tuition fees. Are free, and they're kind of making that a kind of the main thing there. But they've also got the addition of a free childcare to be increased. So they're kind of moving some of those things that they think are going to impact on children as well. But they're also going to expand this, attainment fund as well in schools. In terms of the parties, I mean, obviously Scotland has a rich heritage of education. It feels, I don't know, kind of, as we've looked around, there seems to be kind of it's limited, their offer in terms of education, but it's very focused, I think.
I think it's limited. I certainly liked the fact that if you look on the bottom left in their attainment fund, they're going to give funds directly to head teachers, and I think that's going to help very much at the coal face. Teachers and students will benefit from that, and I think that's really good. the sense I came away with reading the SNP manifesto was it's about money and it's about employment. And I think, okay, I can see where politicians and government would want that. I mean, that's one of the products of education. You produce citizens who are good employees who then generate money. But I did wonder, where are things like, teacher salaries? Where is mental health in the SNP manifesto?
I guess to play devil's advocate there, they did get a higher increase in Scotland. So maybe they're thinking that the teacher salary or the pay deal in Scotland is already kind of dealt with. So maybe that's why that's not there so much.
Yeah.
And
I know, and we'll stay focused on the policies that we're on tonight. But you raise a good point, because in Northern Ireland, teachers are still significantly less well paid than everywhere else in the United Kingdom, and we have a slightly different system. Yes, we do have politicians that sit in Westminster and so on, but we've got our own parties, and they're very lacking in any comment at all about education. Sadly.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think kind of we mentioned it right at the start. I think your intro to this section was absolutely right. Kind of that big kind of, moment where Tony Blair, the absolute front and center of everything he said was, he literally said education, education, education. And we've kind of, as I said, walked all the way through the different parties. And I'm sure there's kind of people within the parties. But I just wonder if that graph at the beginning is the key. It's just not resonating with voters for some reason. Education, which as an educator, we always think it's front and center, and it's the kind of the most important thing, as we should, because that's why we're teachers. We kind of put ourselves there to do it. But it's interesting to kind of come out of the bubble sometimes and kind of think, well, I wonder why this isn't front and center. It's so obvious to us. So it's interesting, kind of. I think kind of with all the manifestos that we've kind of looked at, one of the things that's really striking for me is the kind of the lack of actual focus on detail around things like curriculum, for example, and that kind of big mission in terms of what is it we want out of this thing, this national curriculum, where is this going in the future? And we've said before, we have been critical of the 2010 review with Michael Gove, but you have to say it had a vision. It had something behind it, whether you agree with it or not. And as we've come out of it, there has been criticisms of it, but there was a vision. There was a vision there.
I think the Green Party did talk about changing the national curriculum to be, with learning entitlements. It wasn't really clear what they were. But again, just as you say, we would need more detail on that, which again brings me back to, the point that when these people are on the hustings and so on, education is an area I would like to hear a lot more of. And I think a lot of very valuable debate could be had between politicians on education. And I do think votes are there to be won. I mean, parents, teachers, everybody, but it just does seem to be sadly lacking.
Yeah, well, if you do want to hear some detailed chats around elections and the manifestos, we have a special show on Teachers Talk Radio on Sunday, where we'll be live from 10 a.m. in the morning. We are going to be kind of basically presenting a Teachers Talk Radio manifesto. So if that's something you're interested in and you want to be kind of involved in some way, please let us know, because we think kind of we're going to do it when the people at the top aren't doing it. So that'll be a teachers-led Teacher Talk Radio team kind of getting behind kind of, what does a manifesto look if it came from Teachers Talk Radio and from teachers. So we're coming to the end of our hour, so I just want to say another quick thank you to our sponsors for tonight. We've got John Katz, educational, who you can visit at johncatsbookshop.com to explore their full titles. If you want some kind of CPD, certainly think about coming up to the summer. We've got a code where you can get 20% off at JCTTR2425. We've got teaching how-tos, and you can visit their website, teachinghowtos with a 2.com. Easy for you at www.easyforyou.school, and finally Apps for Good, and you can visit their website www.appsforgood.org to find out more information on those companies. So thank you very much for stepping in tonight, Paul, and
Very welcome,
really
Adam.
well, thank you very much to Professor Neil Humphrey for his time tonight, and all the work that he does. Paul and is it Lucy are with you next? No,
Hannah.
is it Hannah? Sorry, is with you.
Wonderful
next,
Hannah.
the wonderful Hannah. Yep, who's been helping me while Brent's. We'll find out. Brent will no doubt tell us where he's been when he comes back.
Well.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time tonight. As we've always said as well, when we talk about mental health as teachers, make sure you are looking after yourself as we go into the summer as well. Okay. All the best. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Outstanding and world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused